Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about encumbrance. I feel like I've talked about encumbrance a lot, but it turns out I talked about it here and there in a bunch of different videos, but I don't actually have a video about encumbrance. And I want to answer a question from Clown Hustler 5815 who asks, would you share your thoughts on carry weight mechanics? I'm thinking something on the conflict between considerations like limiting the player's progression, economy, role-playing versus realism versus forcing the player to basically stop their game and play inventory Tetris, run around to merchants, meticulously compare weight-value ratios, or go throw the item on a loot goblin pile. That's a long question. I do have answers. I'm going to put this all in one video, so then when it comes up in other videos, I can just refer people to this one. First, I will talk about what exactly I mean by encumbrance. I'm talking about games, I'm really talking about RPGs here, mostly. But let's just say I'm talking about RPGs. I'm talking about RPGs where items have weight, and the player character is limited by some total weight of what they can carry. Now, some role-playing games also limit the number of items you can carry. There's only so many slots, or there's a grid and the items are different shapes. Arcanum did that. Arcanum did both. Or you can have games like Diablo, where there is no weight. It's only the grid. You can carry as many items as you can figure out how to fit on this grid, which means Diablo, you literally were playing Tetris, because there could be an item you couldn't pick up, but if you went in and rearranged your items, suddenly you could pick it up. It's why in Arcanum, Diablo was the reason Arcanum has a button to sort your inventory, because it was fairly easy to write an algorithm to sort it by size so that any free spots could be, you'd compact basically inventory and leave a free area to put items in. It's the same thing that happens in memory garbage collection. Anyway, I digress. So that's what encumbrance is. Items with weight. There's some total weight that you're compared against, and maybe even there's a total size to what you can carry as well. Now, once you have a game with encumbrance in it, you can tie attributes and perks and anything else you want into changing those basic encumbrance rules. You could let people carry more weight. You could make some item groups weigh less. Maybe armor weighs 10% less, or maybe it weighs less when you're wearing it, or maybe it doesn't weigh at all when you're wearing it. Maybe certain items stack that didn't stack before, or maybe instead of being unable to walk when you're overburdened, you can walk slowly when you're encumbered, or maybe instead of saying you can't fast travel when encumbered, you can fast travel when encumbered. So once you have encumbrance, it leads to all these ways you can manipulate those rules around using attributes on the characters. Attributes, I'm talking about attributes in general, attributes, skills, perks on the character to ameliorate different parts of those mechanics that you don't like. Now, there's a lot of people out there, and I've met them and I've worked with them, who don't want encumbrance at all. They think encumbrance is dumb. They don't like it. They want it gotten rid of. What it basically means is they just want to be able to pick up anything they want. It goes into their inventory and they don't want to have to deal with it. My problem with this, like almost everything, isn't I think this is not a way to do it. You can do it, but I think it kicks a lot of problems, or it kicks the can down the road, as a producer I worked with liked to say. In other words, you've gotten rid of one, I don't even want to call it a problem, a frustration, a friction point. Poor player character can't pick up an item that he really wants. Okay, now they picked it up. Now let's look at what you've done. Now look at all the problems you're now going to have to fix in your game. And by the way, I'm not going to tell you how to fix these. This is your issue. If I like having encumbrance in my games, if you don't want it, here's some things you're going to have to fix. First of all, item encumbrance no longer exists as a means of item balancing. Like maybe you have armor that has more damage resistance but it weighs more. It slows down your movement. Maybe it reduces your dodge, or it makes you tumble slower or whatever. Maybe you can keep some of those, but if the weight is something you're going to throw away, and you're saying, "Hey, I want to be able to carry all these things, and I don't care about how much they weigh," then now you're going to make players just carry a lot of that armor, and before they look at a monster and go, what's the best armor I have in my inventory against that particular monster? It also means that leaving items behind no longer exists. That is one of the many ways in doing economy balancing in your game that you manage a source of money. Players can't pick up every item they find, so that source of money is constrained in some way, especially if your game is such that if you leave items behind, when the player comes back, they may not be there anymore. So you've just constrained a source. What sink, or you've unconstrained a source, what sinks are you going to add to balance that? Because let me tell you, it's already hard enough to balance economies in games. I've got a whole video on that. It's hard enough to balance those. If you start unconstraining sources, the sinks are the hard thing to come up with. It's hard to come up with sinks that players have to encounter. I mean, they don't like doing armor repair or weapon repair. They don't like fees for entering cities or using roads or paying guards or bribing, and you can't always make them do that anyway. So sinks are hard to come up with, and you just unconstrained a source. I think the most obvious thing here is inventory UI. You just made it potentially possible for the player to have an infinite number of items. How are you going to make your inventory UI not be a new friction point? In Pillars of Eternity, we added a stash. And a stash was when you picked up more than fit into your inventory, it went into the stash. And the stash was an infinite stack of items, but you could only take the item off the top stack, which in itself was kind of a new friction point. But it meant you could pick up everything you wanted. And then when you got back to town, you could pull things out of the stash. You can also try to handle it with stacking, but now you have tons of items stacked on each other, and you have to deal with issues about stacking. Like if I have an item that has a certain number of charges on it, it can probably only stack with things with light charges. This happens in Fallout 4 with the fusion cores. They have 100 charges on it. As soon as you use one, they don't stack anymore. Pretty soon you end up with a whole mess of fusion cores in your inventory because they all have different charges on them. You can also try to do it with panes, like your inventory just says panes and pages, so you can just add extra pages of stuff. Well, guess what? You've just made a ton of inventory panels that the player will have to search through when they're looking for that one item they want. Well, people have always complained about inventory clutter in RPGs. You just made that problem a lot worse, and how are you going to solve it? Because remember, this all stems from you just going, I want encumbrance gone. Also, you've now incentivized player hoarding. I have a whole video about that. Go watch that video. Look at what all the problems are. You've just made player hoarding a lot worse. I'm not even done yet with the problems you've introduced to. Are all the merchants that exist in the game going to have infinite gold? Because if they don't, the player's still going to have to make multiple trips to different merchants to try to sell off all the stuff they're carrying. And if they have to make multiple trips, in between trips, if they're going on more adventures, they're just getting more stuff. You may create this environment where items are entering into your economy faster than they can possibly get removed. So the player's inventory just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Oh, but they do have infinite gold? Well, now you're going to have that problem where gold becomes basically worthless because it's infinite. It's a whole different problem on player economy. I'm curious how you're going to fix this because I've never seen a game fix this. But you may be super smart and you may work this out. Oh, wait. There's another thing I wanted to mention. Remember all those attribute and skills and perks that I said could interact with carry weight mechanics and adjust encumbrance and different rules for encumbrance? You just got rid of all that. So what new ones are you going to invent? Or are you just going to have less? Either way, you've got a new problem. You've got to invent a whole bunch of new things and new perks and new effects that attributes have, or you're going to have to accept the fact that strength doesn't do as much and there just aren't as many perks for people to pick from anymore. Okay, you may accept that. One last thing. You just threw realism right out the window. This is not realistic. Is that a pillar in your game? Is it part of your game flavor? If so, you just caused a new problem, it's almost an existential problem. You just contradicted a pillar, or you just threw something in that's the wrong flavor for your game. Now, don't make a mistake. I'm not realism. I have a whole fun versus realism video, and I fall down firmly in the fun camp. So this isn't something that you find in my game, but it may be in yours. So if you want no encumbrance, but you want your game to seem very realistic, that's going to cause a tension in your game. It doesn't make sense. So, bottom line, because I've talked for just hit 11 minutes. Should you have encumbrance in your game or not? It's your choice. Especially if you're the design director, decide. But understand what your choice entails and all the issues you've just created, because you're going to have to fix them. Like I said, I don't like it when people, especially leads and directors and people above them, go, I demand you do this and then fix any problems it causes because I'm too busy. This is your problem. You introduced all the issues I just mentioned. You will have to fix all of them or accept them and say, I don't think they're a big deal. But that's everything I can think about on encumbrance. And I hope that helps if you're designing a role-playing game and you're trying to decide what to do with items.